Let me ask you something. What do you feel when you wake up on a Friday? Relief? Excitement? Maybe even a little guilt for counting down the hours. And ask yourself why. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that Friday is the end, the finish line, the sigh of relief after 5 days of hustle. But here's the thing, Friday isn't the end. It's the beginning. Let me explain. Fridays are packed with a kind of energy we don't talk about enough. The tension starts to release. People laugh a little more in the hallways. Deadlines feel less like pressure and more like purpose. And in that moment, when stress fades and spirits rise, something powerful happens. We become more human, we connect easier, we think clearer, we create better, and we often don't even notice it. See, the power of Friday isn't in its promise of rest, it's in its potential for impact. When we believe the week ends on Friday, we rush to finish. When we believe the week culminates on Friday, we pause to reflect. We consider what mattered, we take responsibility for what didn't, and we plant seeds for Monday with clarity. Here's where it gets real. If your team, your friends, your coworkers celebrate Fridays like a jailbreak, that's not a schedule problem. That's a culture problem. Because when people dread the days between Monday and Thursday and only live for Friday, we're not talking about time management. We're talking about meaning. What if Friday was less about escape and more about elevation? A conscious shift from doing to being, a ritual, not a routine. That's how high-performing cultures treat it. They use Friday to close loops, to say thank you, to review the mission, not just the metrics. And they ask one simple question: did we move the needle today, or did we just stay busy? So do you really understand the power of Friday, not as a clock out, but as a check-in? Not as a break, but as a bridge. Not as an ending, but as an ignition. Because when we get Friday right, Monday stops feeling like a threat. It starts feeling like a continuation. Let's start treating Friday for what it truly is, the day that defines how we show up the rest of the week. Thank you, Dot. Let me ask you something. What do you feel when you wake up on a Friday? Relief? Excitement? A rush of anticipation? Maybe even guilt for counting down the hours before the weekend? It's almost like the entire week has been building up to this one moment, this one day that somehow promises something better. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Why does Friday hold that kind of power over us? Why is it so emotionally charged? We've been conditioned to see Friday as the end. The finish line, the moment we get to breathe, unwind, let go, 5 days of hustle, of meetings, of to-do lists, of managing expectations, all leading to this point where we can finally say, I made it. But here's something worth considering. What if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if Friday isn't the end at all? What if it's the beginning? Because something changes on Fridays. It's subtle, but it's there. The tension starts to dissolve. People are a little more relaxed. Conversations shift from transactional to real. Humor comes more easily. There's an energy in the air that feels lighter, more human. It's as if the weight we've been carrying all week finally gives us a moment to stand tall. But that shift, that lift in mood and spirit, isn't just something to enjoy. It's something to use. See, most people don't realize this, but Friday is one of the most strategic days of the week. Why? Because people are more open, their defenses are down, they're more reflective, more collaborative, and if you pay attention, more inspired. It's not that they care less, it's that they feel more. And in that emotional shift lies opportunity. The opportunity to connect, to build, to reflect, to plan, to lead, but we waste it. We treat Friday like the checkout lane at a grocery store. We rush through it, eyes on the clock, heart already halfway into the weekend. And in doing so, we leave value on the table. Think about it. What if we didn't race to the end of the week, but used Friday as a launchpad instead? What if we took all the momentum we built over the week, all the lessons we learned, all the problems we faced, and we used Friday to turn them into insight, into decisions, into meaningful action? The truth is, how we treat Friday reveals how we think about our work. If people are sprinting toward Friday like it's a lifeboat, it doesn't say much about Monday through Thursday. It says even less about how engaged or fulfilled they feel. When Friday becomes the only thing we look forward to, we're not managing time, we're escaping from purpose. That's not just a work issue. That's a cultural issue. It's a sign that we've made the work week something to endure, not something to embrace. Now, imagine flipping the script. Imagine a culture where Friday isn't the finish line, but the most intentional day of the week. Where teams don't just check out, they check in. They close loops, they revisit goals. They recognize each other not just for results, but for effort, for growth, for resilience. Imagine leaders using Friday not to dump one last round of tasks on their team, but to ask a simple, powerful question: what did we learn this week? And more importantly, what do we want to do differently next week? When we treat Friday with intention, Monday starts to change too. It stops feeling like a threat. It doesn't carry the same dread, because now you're entering a new week already grounded, already clear. You've already reflected. You've already reconnected with why you're doing work in the first place. Friday sets the tone for Monday, not by accident, but by design. And there's something else. That collective lift in mood we all feel on Friday, it's not just about getting out of work. It's about getting back to ourselves, the version of us that feels free. That version is closer to who we are at our core. So why not build systems, teams, and rituals that help us bring that version of ourselves into every day, not just the one with happy hour at the end of it? Friday can be a turning point, not just a time to stop, but a time to ask, did I make progress? Did I lead with purpose? Did I help someone else succeed? Did I grow? These aren't questions for performance reviews. These are questions for Friday afternoons when it's quiet, when the calls are done, and you have a moment to think. Because that moment, that pause, is where the real power of Friday lies, not in the relief, but in the reflection. Not in the escape, but in the elevation. And when we understand that, we stop just ending our week. We start elevating our lives. What is it about Friday that feels different? Why does the atmosphere shift even when the work hasn't changed? You could be in the middle of a packed schedule with meetings stacked and emails unanswered, and yet there's something in the air. It's like an unspoken permission to breathe, a collective exhale. But the real question isn't what we feel on Friday. The real question is whether we understand what that feeling means and what we're supposed to do with it. For most people, Friday is the light at the end of the tunnel. It's the day they've been waiting for since Monday morning. It represents escape, freedom, and a brief return to the life they feel they're not really living between 9 and 5. But that narrative, as familiar as it is, tells us something far more important than we realize. If Friday feels like a rescue mission, it means the rest of the week is drowning. That should concern us, not because people want rest is essential, but because of what it says about how people experience their work, their time, and even themselves during the week. There's a hidden truth buried in the way we talk about Friday. It reflects the health of our culture. It reflects how aligned or misaligned our purpose is. When Friday becomes the only day people look forward to, we've created a system that celebrates endurance over meaning. That might sound harsh, but think about it. If people are watching the clock, counting down, mentally checking out by lunch, what does that say about their engagement? About their connection to the work? About how we've designed the environment they spend half their lives in? Now here's the twist. Friday doesn't have to be the finish line. In fact, it's far more powerful when it becomes the turning point. That energy you feel on Friday, that spark, that mental release isn't just relief. It's clarity. It's presence. It's the moment your brain shifts from surviving to reflecting. That moment is gold. That moment is where momentum lies, not the hustle of Monday. Not the meetings of Wednesday. Right there in the quiet between almost done and finally free is where your most honest thoughts appear. The thoughts about what really worked this week, what didn't, who you became, who you ignored, what you're proud of or not, and most importantly, why it all mattered. We don't talk enough about the power of intention. Friday gives us that chance. It's the day when pressure dips just low enough for self-awareness to sneak in. And that's where growth actually begins. When people are less reactive, they're more reflective. When they're more reflective, they become more strategic. And when that happens across a team, a business, a culture, everything changes. Because now you're not just doing work, you're directing it, you're designing it. You're using the past 5 days not just to get things done, but to understand how you got them done and whether that way made sense. Some of the best leaders I've seen don't wait for performance reviews or planning meetings to assess progress. They use Fridays, a few quiet minutes to check in with their people. A simple message that says, what felt meaningful this week? Or what slowed you down? It's not about micromanaging. It's about perspective. When we make Friday a space for conversation instead of escape, we unlock something deeper. We remind people that they are part of something that moves, that grows, that learns just like they do. And it's not just about work. Friday gives us the gift of transition, the shift from structure to freedom, from task lists to life lists. It's the bridge between who we are at work and who we are at home. But here's the catch. The way you cross that bridge matters. If you stumble off the edge, burned out and checked out, the weekend won't feel like rest, it'll feel like recovery. But if you step into it with intention, with clarity, with a sense of completeness, then the weekend becomes something else entirely. It becomes a continuation of who you are, not just a reaction to what you've survived. There's also something deeply human about the rhythm of Friday. It reminds us that time isn't just a measurement, it's a feeling. Time expands and contracts based on how connected we feel. When we feel drained, time crawls. When we feel aligned, it flies. Friday shows us this in real time. It's proof that mindset shapes momentum. And that's why it matters how we treat this day. Because if we learn to harness that shift, that subtle but powerful lift in energy, we can carry it into everything that follows. Not just the weekend, not just Monday, but our entire approach to how we live and lead. There's a strange thing that happens every week, and we've all felt it, even if we never stop to name it. It starts around Thursday afternoon, peaks on Friday morning, and carries us through the rest of the day. It's a shift, an emotional, mental, almost spiritual shift. People walk a little lighter. Conversations become a little more relaxed. Even the way we answer emails changes. It's not because the tasks are easier. It's not because the deadlines disappear. It's because we know Friday is here, and for some reason that changes everything. But here's the question: do we really understand the power of Friday? Or have we reduced it to a countdown clock, a reward system, a psychological finish line for a race we didn't want to run in the first place? The way we treat Friday says more about us than we think. It tells the truth about how we experience the rest of the week. If Friday is the day we live for, then what exactly are we doing with the other four? That's not just a question of productivity. That's a question of purpose. Because when you zoom out, you start to realize that Friday isn't just about what's ending, it's about what we've been holding off. All the joy, the freedom, the real version of ourselves that we've been postponing until the clock hits 5 p.m. on a Friday, that's the life we're trying to get back to. And if that's the only time we feel fully ourselves, then maybe it's time to take a harder look at how we're living. But let's go deeper. What is it exactly that makes Friday feel so different? It's not just the anticipation of the weekend. It's the psychological release. The moment our brain believes the pressure is off, something changes in us. We become less guarded, more creative, more willing to think bigger. The filter of urgency starts to fade, and we begin to see things more clearly. That clarity is powerful. It's the same reason some of our best ideas come when we're not trying so hard, when we're in the shower on a walk, or yes, winding down on a Friday afternoon. It's because the noise finally quiets. And when the noise quiets, the truth shows up. This is where the opportunity lies. Friday isn't just a relief valve. It's a signal. It's a mirror showing us how heavy we've been carrying things, and it's also an invitation to set them down long enough to think. The problem is, most of us don't accept that invitation. We're too busy trying to outrun the clock. But the real power of Friday comes when we slow down just enough to reflect. When we ask ourselves questions that don't always fit in a Monday meeting or a midweek sprint. Questions like, did I move the needle in a meaningful way? Did I lead or did I just manage? Did I grow or did I just endure? Fridays are for reflection, not just relief. When we start seeing them that way, everything shifts. That energy we crave doesn't have to be reserved for the weekend. It can become part of our rhythm, a built-in moment to pause, recalibrate, and realign. And the best part is, it doesn't require a retreat or a big strategy session. It can happen in 10 quiet minutes before you leave the office. A quick journal note, a thoughtful conversation with a teammate, a moment of gratitude. These aren't productivity hacks. They're perspective tools. And they're what allow us to stop running on autopilot and start leading with awareness. The workplace is filled with conversations about performance goals and deadlines, but we don't talk enough about rhythm. The way the energy of a team rises and falls, the way momentum builds or evaporates. Friday is a crucial part of that rhythm, not because it's when we stop working, but because it's when we remember why we work. It's when we reconnect to what we care about, what drives us, and who we're doing this for. And when that reconnection happens weekly, not just at offsites or annual reviews, something fundamental changes in the culture. The team becomes more than a group of people executing tasks. It becomes a group of people building meaning. The truth is, Friday is the most honest day of the week. It's when people show up as they really are. A little tired, a little human, but also more open, more real. And if we know how to tap into that version of ourselves, the version that's not buried under stress or racing through back-to-back calls, we can make better decisions, build stronger relationships, and lead more intentionally. That's the power of Friday, not as an ending, but as a moment of possibility that most of us miss because we're too eager to escape. Let me know if you'd like a version in a more casual tone or adapted for a particular audience like students, professionals, or leaders.